Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radiantresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of infidelity, sex addiction, emotional abuse, divorce, alcohol abuse, mental health struggles, including thoughts of not wanting to wake up, trauma, and recovery. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember, this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back to Radiant Resilience, everyone. I have a very dear friend of mine that is our guest today, Melissa Moore. And she's actually one of my clients, has been sitting in my chair for a few years now, and we've gotten to know each other really well. And she's shared a lot with me. I've shared a lot with her. We're going to hear a bit about her story today. Melissa, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay, let's see. I haven't had to do this in a long time.
Oh.
So I am in media here in Denver, Colorado, and have been on the radio and 30 years now.
Oh, wow.
So I know. So I've done radio and TV, I've done news, but my sweet spot, my love is radio.
Hmm.
So I have been here in Denver for the past 10 years. I did radio shows. I had the number one morning show in Minneapolis, in
Wow.
Orlando. I did a syndicated show out in Nashville. I used to fill in on an afternoon TV show in Minneapolis. I write a blog called More for Love, and you can find me at melissamoremedia.com if you want to reach out. And I will probably try and put this up there if I can
Oh,
figure it out. I'm
that'd
not
be
really
great.
IT savvy, but my husband is. So
Yeah, well,
he's good at that.
yeah, we'll link your stuff in the show notes
Okay.
too.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
for all
Perfect.
that. But yeah, so Melissa has shared some stuff with me over the years and has a very interesting story about her first marriage. So I think we're going to go there if we can. Where would you like to start? You want to start from where you guys met? Do you want to, where do
Well,
you think? How you
so
feeling?
here's the funny thing, and I don't even think you realize this. That was my second marriage. Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not
No,
know
no, no,
that.
no, no. No, and I tell you that because it's kind of part of the story.
Mhm.
So my first marriage was right out of college.
Okay.
And basically, it was like I slept with a guy, so I thought I should marry him.
Oh,
I grew
shoot.
up in this like super conservative religious family.
Okay.
And that's part of the story as well.
Mhm.
And so I got married. We were better off just as friends and got divorced a few years later. And it was no big deal. No drama, no nothing.
Okay.
So I was single for a while and met my ex-husband
Mhm.
when I was in my late 20s.
Mhm.
And so we did this rush into I felt the baby clock ticking. Let
Oh,
me just
yeah,
be
for sure.
honest.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my gosh, I want to get married. I want to have a family." So I meet this guy and we date, and we met in October, and what would have that been? 99,
Okay.
and got married in May of 2000.
Okay. Oh,
So
yeah.
that's how fast that was.
Yeah, real
I was
fast.
engaged by January of 2000.
Okay.
And so
That's
it was
a
a
quick
rush.
time to plan a wedding, too.
Oh, yeah, the wedding. But you know what? Because it was my second marriage, I didn't need the big
Yeah.
wedding. We still had a backyard wedding.
Okay.
But we also lived in separate cities. So I didn't know him.
Mm.
So I thought I knew him. I knew the idea I wanted to have of him, but I didn't
Mm.
really know him looking back.
Okay.
And so we get married, and I did all the things that you shouldn't do. I quit my job,
Oh.
sold my house, moved across country to
Oh,
be with
wow.
him. And so we moved to Florida. And at the time, I was sick of Colorado winters. So I'm like, sure, I agree in January in Florida, which is lovely.
Yeah, sounds
So,
great.
yeah, so I get there, and um, so we're married now, living in Florida. Fast forward, and we had always talked about wanting to have a baby.
Mhm.
So he had a vasectomy, and he
Mm.
had it reversed.
Okay.
We were told that we weren't going to be able to have a baby. It just wasn't going to happen for us, that we're going to have to go through all the extremes. And so I was at the doctor, and I had been just not feeling well. And she said, let me run a pregnancy test. And I'm like, okay, fine, but it's going to be negative because all the experts told us it would never happen.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I was pregnant.
Oh, man.
So that was 5 years into our marriage.
Okay.
And so, miracle baby, I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. We'd been married 5 years. Things were okay. They weren't awesome looking back,
Mhm.
but they were okay.
Okay.
And so when my daughter, so in the fall of 2006, my daughter's about 18 months at that point, and I am doing a morning show in Orlando. And so what that means is I'm getting up every day at 4 o'clock and going
Oh,
into the
wow.
radio station, and I was doing a big time morning show in Orlando. And a lot of times listeners would send me emails. And so I get this email from this address I don't recognize, pretty normal to get emails like this at work. So I get this email, and this woman says, hi, you don't know me, but I've been having an affair with your husband for several years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I look back, and this has been, think about how many years ago this has been now. And I look back, and I can still feel just
Mm.
that sickening feeling,
Mm,
because
I
there was part of
can.
me that was like, that's not true. Like, I had no indication of anything like that.
Yeah.
He was always telling me how amazing I was, how much he loved me. He doted all over me. We had this miracle baby, which is why I told you about that. There was this life that I thought we had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said, and by the way, I'm not the only one.
Oh, wow.
And so I am shaking. I call him up, and because my producer was with me at the time, and he's, this can't be true. This is somebody just being a jerk because you're in the media, you're in the
Mm.
public eye. This can't be true. And yet I emailed her back and said, I think you've got the wrong person. And she's, no, I don't. I
Mm.
know everything about your pregnancy. I know about your whole journey. She knew all these intimate details of my life because he had told her.
Oh
She was
my
fully aware of his
gosh.
life and everything going on with him. I had no idea. And it had been going on since almost the beginning of our marriage.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
So you fast forward, and I go home. I confront him. He admits it, but he was like,
Oh,
oh, I never slept with her. We were just,
oh,
it was inappropriate online. I'm like, so I send this woman back an email, and he's not telling you the truth. Ask him about Miami.
oh.
Oh, okay. Well, what I was able to put together is that Miami is where she met up with him. And obviously they had sex. They stayed in a hotel room together.
Is that
And
where they
so,
met, like, the first time?
no, they met
No.
online. All this
Oh,
had
okay.
happened online.
Okay.
And it was back when chat groups were big. And
Mm,
I
okay.
never got into that. That wasn't, I was, had been, have been a public figure for a long time. So I never would have gone into a chat room. I didn't even know what they were.
Yeah.
Once again, not IT savvy at all. It's like I can do emails and that's about
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And so they had met at a chat room and then had agreed to meet in a different city than we lived in.
Mhm.
And she met him up there, and he had just recently reached out to her and asked her to meet him in a different city. And
Okay.
that's why she let me know. And when
Okay.
I put together where he met her, It was when I was pregnant, and
Oh.
it just broke my heart.
Oh, for sure.
And so at this point is I think where when I think about the story, I always think this is where people say, I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm going. But I was already divorced once, which was already a
Mhm.
family scandal.
Mhm.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, I can't go through this again. But yet I was so angry at this person.
Mhm.
And so I agreed to go to marriage therapy with him.
Mhm.
And we had gone to a church there outside of Orlando and found this therapist who specialized in sex addiction. I didn't
Okay.
even know what that was.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you're addicted to sex? That makes no
So
sense
did
to me.
did he find this person then? Or
Yes,
did
of
okay.
course, because I was like, look, I'm doing no effort for this marriage.
Mm.
I'm doing no effort for you. And so after everything blows up, he finds his therapist. We go to see her, and I still haven't committed that I'm staying. I'm just going to try to figure out what's going on
Mhm.
because now my life has blown up. I took off, I don't know how many days from work. It felt like a long time. It was probably 3 or 4 days. I wasn't on the air. I was like,
Mhm.
I can't get up and be peppy and talk about life and laugh and talk about celebrity gossip.
And
This
pretend
was
everything's
also,
okay.
and I pretend
Mhm.
everything's okay. I couldn't do that. I went to therapy with him, and that was the first time I'd heard the term sex addict.
Okay.
I didn't know what that was. Now I think we're aware of it, but back in 2006,
Mm.
it wasn't talked about as much. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
And so after, I guess, weeks of going, I found out that what is normal for a sex addict is they will only admit because addicts lie. That's the bottom line is whether it's alcohol or drugs or alcohol, addicts lie.
Mhm.
So that whole part, I've never slept with her. That wasn't true. She's the only one. That wasn't true.
Oh,
And so
wow.
there's this day that happens in therapy called the discovery day.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be when all the details, when the truth comes out.
Okay. And did that happen randomly then, or is that like a planned thing?
That's a plan thing.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
definitely a plan thing.
Okay.
So discovery day comes
Mhm.
and I didn't know that it was discovery day when I walked in the door, but the therapist
Wow.
knew it.
Okay.
And so she hands him this yellow legal pad and says, I want you to write down every woman that you've been with or
Ew.
had an online affair with.
Okay.
Because he still contended that the only person I was ever physical with was this one woman. But yet he said there were all these other women that he would talk to online and do other stuff with online. You can imagine.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. All that crap was going on online.
Ugh.
And so she hands him this yellow legal pad. And what I remember from that day is he's writing down just first names, line after line after line, and he flips the page over. And I went, oh shit.
Oh my gosh.
It was that moment of I can hear the paper crunching, I can
Ugh.
hear it, and realizing how big of a problem this was. But yet
Yeah.
at the same time, I have a toddler.
Mm.
My parents had divorced. I didn't want to bring my child through that. I had already been divorced once. I've already got the scarlet letter of the, Southern
Mm.
Baptist Christian family on me. I'm on every prayer
Mm.
chain in the
Oh.
South praying for my soul because I'm already divorced once. God
Oh.
forbid, like I don't need another divorce. And I also didn't
Yeah.
have any self-esteem.
Mm.
And so even after that moment, that discovery day, I decided to stay. And it wasn't that day that I decided. It was weeks down the line.
You had to process what was happening, what
And I
had
don't
just
think I
happened.
and I don't think I ever really processed it.
Mm.
What I let myself believe is he's sick. And
Mm.
I said in my vows, in sickness and health.
Okay.
If he's sick, then I'll stay.
Sure.
And I went into fix it mode. So instead of feeling my feelings and
Mm.
dealing with what I was feeling and the grief and the loss and just the grief of this dream and this life that I thought we were going to
Ugh.
have
Yes.
and having to let go of that. That
Ugh.
my life now, because we were supposed to be trying for another baby.
Oh man.
It was the reason I have one baby today and I'm thankful for her, but I wanted two is
Mm.
because this happened.
Mm,
And so it was letting go of all of that. And instead of dealing with it, I was like, I'm going to fix you. I'm
mm,
great at fixing stuff
mm.
because in my career, I was super successful
Yeah.
and I could fix things and I could control my image and I could control what I put out there about myself. But in my private life, it was a freaking hot mess
Mm.
and nobody could know. And
Oh, yeah. So
so
you guys were dealing with it very privately. Did you even share with family?
a little bit. Family knew a
Okay.
little bit because I called my family. Hold on. I had my so I have a wonderful husband now who I was like, I'm gonna need a drink for this conversation. He's okay. I'm like, I know it's a little early, but throw me together one.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I support it.
Pretend like it's 5 o'clock wherever you're watching this.
Yes.
What was I saying? I totally forgot where I left off here.
Oh, whether you shared with family or not.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, let's get back to that. Sorry, I got suckered into my drink. I'm like, what are we
All
talking
good.
about? Yeah. So with my family, because when it happened, they were the phone call that I made.
Yeah.
And so they were aware, but I never told them the extent of the betrayal, the extent of the affairs, because I was afraid that if they knew and I decided to stay with them, they would never forgive them. So
Which
I
is a
went,
risk you take when you share that stuff with your
yes,
family. I remember when my parents got divorced and my dad had an affair for a while, and my mom was debating on whether to share that with her parents because they were
right.
going to try to work things out. So she didn't
Yes.
want them to have this image of him if they ended up getting through this.
So my parents knew about this one person,
Okay.
but they didn't know that he was a sex addict. They didn't know that there were pages full of names of women that he will tell you he only got together with online.
Hmm.
I don't believe it. But that was his story.
Yeah.
So my family knew a little bit. Work knew a very small amount just because it had happened at work.
Mm.
So my meltdown happened at work. I had to take days off of work and I had to explain to my boss why I'm not
Yeah.
coming in. So they knew a little bit about what was going on, but nobody ever really knew the whole thing. And then the screwed up part about all of it is so somehow, because I don't know if it's because we had a Christian counselor or because this was her belief, but she had told us, don't share it with anybody. You don't want to embarrass your husband. You don't want to add to his shame. He already feels bad about it. So
Mm.
don't say anything. And so I think for me, that was part of the part of me where I lost myself, where
Mm.
I couldn't talk about it because I wasn't supposed to embarrass or shame him. My family didn't know.
Mm.
And so I just had to push it down and pretend like everything was okay. And especially since I was the one who had decided to stay. How do you go back and say, hey, he's a dick. Here's what he did.
Yeah.
And yet I'm staying.
Mm.
It just doesn't work like
There
that.
would be a lot of judgment from other
Of
people there.
course. Of
Hmm.
course. I look back and I judge myself
Mm.
about why would you choose to stay?
Mm.
And especially because as we're going through all this therapy and I'm finding out he's a sex addict, addiction is it's never one thing. Very few people are like, yeah, I'm only addicted to alcohol, but I'm fine with drugs, or I'm only
Mm.
addicted to sex, but I'm fine with this and this. And for him, I remember the therapist was like, you've got a problem with alcohol.
Oh,
You've got a problem with sex. And so her recommendation was him not to drink for a year,
okay.
us not to tell anybody about what was going on,
That's
and
so
to really
isolating.
yeah, and to really get into Jesus. And I love Jesus, but you know what? That it was not the right advice.
Mm.
It was the recipe for shame. And it
Ugh.
was a recipe for secrets, which is so interesting because when you think about an addiction, it's always about secrets.
Yeah, that's true.
And so why in the world would somebody say, "Hey, keep this a secret.
Mm.
Don't shine a light on it. Don't tell anybody.
Mm.
Pray it away and it'll be fine."
Is there maybe a piece of that too where he maybe thought in his head, oh, we're not going to tell anybody about this? So
Mhm.
does
Mhm.
that do you think that kind of gave him, I don't know, we haven't gotten to that part yet, but would that have given him the okay to maybe continue? Oh, we're just not going to tell anybody about this.
It's interesting because I don't know what he continued and what he didn't. But what
Yeah.
I know is that like when you push down one addiction, another one usually pops up.
Okay.
And so pushing down the sex addiction meant the alcohol abuse popped up and meant
Mm.
that the emotional abuse got worse.
Okay. So that's what happened next.
So that's what happened next is the drinking got worse. The emotional abuse where it was more manipulative before
Okay.
I found out all of a sudden became very emotionally abusive.
Mm.
And so I choose to stay and he gets more emotionally abusive because he's angry.
Mm.
His secret is out. His life has been turned upside down. He can't act out anymore. And it was just this angry, awful household.
Ugh.
And then I'm keeping it a secret from my family because that's what my therapist said to do.
Did that just eat you alive? I am very much an open book a lot of the times. And I
Mhm.
know I've had my moments where I've suppressed my feelings and emotions, but like
Right.
that would eat me from the inside out to not be able to talk to anybody about it. And then the only person you had to talk to about it was this therapist that you were
Right.
going to with him, right?
Right.
Oh,
And in the middle of all of this, he lost his job. I lost my job.
oh
And
no.
then I got offered this amazing job in Minneapolis,
Mhm.
hosting probably the biggest morning show, radio morning show in town. And so high stress, high profile. And then shortly after we moved there for my job, our daughter gets diagnosed with autism.
Oh
So you
wow.
have that piece of the puzzle. So all of a sudden, my focus was her and her
Sure.
needs. And our marriage became it just went on the back burner.
Mm,
And so we didn't have a therapist.
okay. You quit seeing the
We
therapist at some point?
we ended up seeing, I think, a total, I think it was one, two, 3 or 4 therapists
Okay.
in our marriage. The Christian therapist in Florida was the only one that really wanted us to stay together. The other ones were like, "Why the hell are you still there?"
Oh,
She's, "I
geez.
don't." Yeah, I don't normally tell people this, but you need to leave
Wow.
because the emotional abuse had gotten so bad.
Oh.
And it was just not a healthy place. And then the other thing is when you're not, it's funny, I'm doing a speech coming up about how the choices we make always have a cost.
Mm,
And for me, that cost was losing myself, like you were saying. Like I keeping that secret, losing myself, it took a huge toll on me. And I'd had an eating disorder when I was younger. It had been under control and then it reared its ugly head during all this because
yeah.
I was a mess.
Oh.
I was a mess. As I tell the story, I'm like, "Oh
Mm.
my god, whose life was that?"
Oh.
Like, what the sorry, I know I swear when
We
I
can
talk
swear on
about
here. I fully support it. I'll just put the explicit warning on.
Oh, I love it. I get an E. I can't
Yeah.
wait. I'm, like, actually proud of myself. I'm gonna get an E.
Yep.
But it was like,
Mm.
what the my life, it was what the hell had it become? I choose to stay in this marriage really for all the wrong reasons.
So how long did you from, okay, you find out that he's a sex addict, and then how long was it that you attempted to fix it in that time frame to where then now you're saying that all of these other things started happening and
Right.
then it went on the back burner? Do
I
you
mean,
feel like you did any fixing of it in that time frame?
yeah, there were other therapists in that time
Okay.
frame.
Okay.
So it was a matter of, okay, let's figure out what's going on with our daughter and try to get her help. And then it was also, wow, we're sucking right now. And you're angry and I'm eating my feelings and you're
Mm.
drinking your feelings. And what can we do? And let's find a therapist. And therapist would be like, wow, he's got serious anger issues. You need to
Oh,
leave.
wow.
And he would be like, "Hey, we're not gonna go back and see that person." So I
Oh,
think we
right.
got fired by 2 or
Oh,
3 therapists. Yeah, they wouldn't see us
oh.
anymore. Mm-mm.
Ugh. And
Yeah.
it was because he wouldn't open up, he wouldn't fix things, he wouldn't.
I don't yeah, yes, and he was angry that we were there.
Mm,
So his anger towards me for taking him there, he would take
mm,
it out on the therapist.
ah,
Yeah. And so
and
they
no
would
more.
say, "We're done.
Yeah.
There you have serious issues. I'm afraid for your safety.
Mm,
You should leave." And I would say, "I can't leave." And I had a daughter with autism. I was the breadwinner. He worked part-time, but not full-time. And so then we would not go to therapy for a year or two, and then it would get bad again, and then we'd be back in therapy, and then we'd get fired again from the
Oh my
therapist.
gosh. How
I
many
mean,
years was that?
so from the time I found out to the time I got divorced was 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh no. Talk about the cost. Like
Oh,
I stayed for 10 freaking years after I found out.
you gave it a solid effort, my
I
friend.
did. I
Oh,
did to a detriment of myself
hmm. Yeah.
because the person I was that found out was probably healthier than the person that finally left after 16
Mm.
years of marriage. That person was a mess.
Yeah.
And it
That
really
person
took
had been through a lot.
the person, yes. I look at who I was then, and I had met somebody towards the end of that time, and I thought that person was going to save me.
Oh,
But that person was really just the catalyst to get me out. And
okay.
that was their role. And I
Yeah.
am thankful for that.
Hmm.
But it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not without fault. Like I had to throw a bomb into our marriage in order for me to leave.
Mm.
I couldn't just walk out because I had been gaslit so many times and it was so unhealthy that it really took me blowing up my marriage in order for me to leave. But that's what I wanted. I just couldn't say it because when you're married to an addict and somebody who is, it's a lot of gaslighting. It is
Mm.
a lot of emotional abuse because they're angry about where they are. You're
Hmm.
angry that you stayed and you've now become this codependent person. And it's a bad recipe.
So, do you know if he had any of the sex addict stuff going on in that 10 years, or was that mostly just the alcohol addiction that,
I don't know. He said he
okay.
didn't.
Hmm.
I can say I don't believe that. I did for a long time,
Sure.
but there have been things that I found out towards the end of our marriage.
Mm.
My favorite, and this is my kind of sick and twisted humor, is that he joined an online dating site and used my PayPal account to pay for it.
What?
Yeah, I was like, dumbass,
Oh
seriously.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Ugh. Oh my goodness. So, what happened then when you finally got out?
Finally got out. It was ugly,
Mm.
messy. I had a lot of dark days where I would wish I wouldn't wake up
Mm.
because it was so painful. He was awful. He was angry, even though he had a girlfriend by then on the side, and I was dating somebody. So it was awful.
Mm.
And and I had a therapist, thank God. So the last therapist that I had gone to see, she said something that finally broke through to me. She said, here's the deal. If you want to stay in this marriage, you have to blow up everything you know about it and start over
Mm.
and build a new foundation and build a new framework and everything. And I remember looking at him in that therapy session. It was the last one we ever went to. And I looked at her and I said, I wouldn't choose him again. I'm like,
Oh,
I would never choose you again. This is bullshit. I'm done with this.
what an
And for
epiphany.
some, yeah, a huge epiphany, huge moment of clarity. And when I had, that's when I was able to leave.
Mm.
And why it took that, I mean, it's all about history and it's everything in your life comes into play at that point.
And also, probably when you were ready to receive that
Right.
information, too.
My family had tried to tell me, despite them being very strong Christians and them not wanting to see me divorced, they tried to tell me to leave. And I was
Mm.
like, no, it's a trap. They don't mean it.
Oh, no.
No way am I going to have another scarlet letter. I'm already the one that got
Mm.
divorced.
So, did you ever feel like you were in the middle of them, like your family and him at one point then? If they're telling you to leave and you're not ready to leave yet, did you feel
Um,
like you were in the middle of, were they mad at him, excluding him, anything like that?
no, our family can be very passive aggressive. So God forbid we would say these things.
Okay.
No. But I knew they were upset.
Mm.
And I think they're also very loving and kind. And so I think they took their cues. If you decided to stay and forgive them, then we will do our best to do the same.
Mm. That's very
So
kind
they
of
they
them.
thought yeah, it really was very kind. And so I think what happened is they thought everything was okay. I pretended like everything was okay. So I just
Mm.
fueled that.
Okay.
And yet, for me, it was chipping away at who I was.
Mm.
And it was I probably about a year before I decided we were gonna get divorced, I remember my mom was out visiting and she looked at me and she goes, "What happened to my little girl who was so happy and
Oh.
loved life?" And I looked at her and I said, "She's dead. She hasn't been here for a long time."
Oh, Melissa.
And that's when I knew. I was like, "Wow." 'Cause I didn't even think about it, but that's how it was. I'm like, "Oh,
Mm.
no way."
Wow.
Yeah.
So you left and
Mhm.
you are now this broken human.
Yep. Totally broken. Shattered on the floor.
So how did you put it back together? What was that journey like?
It was long. It's
Mhm.
not a fast and easy process. When your heart has been shattered and your self-esteem is shattered and the vision you had of your life, how you thought it was gonna look, when all of those things are broken, you have to rebuild. You have to rebuild something, and I had a therapist who was truly amazing. She was the last therapist we saw together.
Mhm.
She was the one that said, "If you wanna stay, you're gonna have to blow up your marriage and start
Mhm.
over," and so months after the divorce process had started, I reached out to her and said, "I need help. Will you
Mhm.
see me?" And she's, "Yeah, get your butt in here. Let's do it." And she goes, "I'm gonna ask you a lot of hard questions and make you look at a lot of hard truths because there's you always have a role in." So
Yeah.
even though he was a sex addict, even though he did this and this, I had a role in that marriage, choosing to stay, choosing him in the first place. And so it took a lot of hard conversations about what my role was, why, where it came from. And so years of therapy with her
Mm.
got me to a place where I was like, "Oh, okay." All of a
Mhm.
sudden, I was like, I was happy again. I
Yeah.
had this joy that I hadn't felt in years and years.
Mm.
But it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of tears. It was a lot of feeling lonely. It
Yeah.
was a lot of I tried to heal through dating. And I was like,
A
"Yeah,
lot of people do that
oh
after
gosh."
divorces. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I was like, "I know, I'll go online and date. This has to be so much easier." And I think had I found the right person back then, it would have stopped my growth, but I didn't. I just kept having disastrous dating
Oh,
stories
shoot.
because I kept picking the same kind of person.
Mm.
I kept picking these
Oh.
narcissists, and they would look different, they would act different, but at their core, it was the same issues I'd been dealing with.
Mm.
And so that was I'd walk into her office and be like, "Shit." I said, "Guess what I just did again? I just picked the same person." She's like, "Yeah, I know." I'm like,
Oh,
"Really?"
no.
She's like, "Yeah, I saw that one coming." I'm like, "How
Oh.
did you know?" She's "Because we are not at the core of
Mm.
what's been going on with you. What's broken in you that you pick this kind of person?"
Mm. Did you
And
eventually figure that out?
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it sucks because it's like, we have talked about my childhood, and one of my therapist friends always said, he's like, it always goes back there, and you
Yeah.
have to go back and unpack some of that stuff,
Yeah.
and then you're like, "Oh," and so she helped me,
Yeah.
and so finally one day I was like, "Yeah, I am done dating. I am done with everything. I'm just done." And then here it was a short time later that I met my now husband, who is
Mhm.
nothing like he's wonderful. He's
Because you
nothing like
healed
what I
you.
yes, because I healed
Mm.
me, because I
Yeah.
got healed, and I found out that missing person that I was looking for love from was me. Like,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I wasn't loving myself, and until I really could figure that piece out and forgive myself and accept myself
Mm.
and say, "Here's my journey. It's messy, it's ugly, and here's my role in it." Because as much as my ex-husband, he screwed a lot of stuff up, he wasn't the only one in the relationship.
Mm.
I chose to stay. I picked him in the first place. So
Mhm.
what was broken in me? And until I got all of that, I would not have met the right person.
Mm. And you said he was emotionally abusive. So was he
Mhm.
putting you down a lot as well? Because I can imagine 10 years of maybe him telling you, oh, I don't know. You said he was also very loving and I love you and love bombing you. It sounds
Love bombing.
like.
Yes,
Mhm.
not loving,
Okay.
love bombing. Because I remember sitting one time in my therapist office post divorce, and she goes, "Well, you realize that you were emotionally abused, right?" I go, "No."
Oh, you didn't
She's like,
realize that.
"No." And she goes, she goes, "Wait a minute, back up." She goes, "You don't know this." I'm like, "No." And so she would recount some of the stories. I'm like, "He really just loved me." She goes, "He didn't love you." I was like,
Oh.
"Damn it. Now you're telling me not only was I emotionally abused, but he didn't love me." And she's, "That's not love."
Oh,
And it was all these little stories. Like there's this one episode that happened with a fork on a
okay.
plate. And this was the catalyst to our next to last therapist who fired us.
Okay.
And I handed him a plate of food and the fork slid off and slid into the food. So now it's in like crap. And he slams the plate down. He's like, "How dare you disrespect me like this?" And he starts yelling at me. And
Mm,
our daughter, who would have been in first grade, no, third grade at the time, she starts crying and she's screaming,
mm,
"Stop yelling at my mommy."
mm,
And it's awful. And he's, "You give me dinner and then you disrespect me by putting the fork in the plate." And I'm like, "It slid." It was just this huge thing. And I knew when that happened that it was bad, but I still didn't say it was emotional abuse. And then little things, little stories where I would tell my therapist, I was like, "Yeah, I put this outfit on." And he looked at me and he's like, "You better in short skirts. That just is not your most flattering look." Yeah. So all these things. And you would think that I'm like, "Oh, relatively intelligent. I'm successful in my business life. How is it that I didn't understand that was emotional abuse, but I didn't?"
mm.
I was like, "No, he's just being helpful." She's, "That's not helpful."
You were making excuses for him.
But I truly believed it. That was
Yeah.
the messed up part.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ugh. So, did you have contact with him then once you guys, how old was your daughter when you guys got divorced?
6th grade, so
Yeah, you still had to parent together.
we still had to parent together.
And how was that?
It sucked at first,
Mm,
and it really always sucked.
mm,
But I learned something, and that is, especially with somebody who gaslights you,
mm.
they always want a reaction out of you. So
Oh,
they will throw things at you, and if you can identify the hook, what's the thing that they're trying to hook you into reacting to?
okay.
And if you can identify the hook and be like, "Oh, there it is."
Okay.
That's where they're trying to get me to lose my crap.
Hmm.
When you can identify that and not react to it because you know exactly what the purpose is,
Hmm.
all of a sudden I was like, "Ugh." He would say something trying to get a reaction out of me and I would see it for what it was.
Mm,
And it just stopped working.
mm.
And I just kept it factual. Stay with the facts.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bite. I'm not going to go down that road. I'm not going to talk to you about who I'm dating. I'm not going to, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Then it got a little bit, it was never easy,
Yeah. Sure.
but it had less of a toll on me.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed, was not to be a wreck every time I had to talk to him or every time we had an interaction.
Yeah. Because there's probably a lot of hurt and anger still there too in some of those
Right.
chapters.
He was mad at me. I had started dating one of our friends
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of our marriage. So he's mad at me. And it
Mm.
just, and what I learned with somebody who has a sex addiction is, you're not, I wasn't Melissa, his wife. I was a possession.
Oh.
And somebody took his favorite possession
Ooh.
and and had it now. And he didn't have it. So he was just angry. So all of a sudden the anger level just went super
Oh,
high.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
I know, fun story, huh? It's so uplift.
This is your story. This is reality. And that's what I'm trying to do with this
Mm,
podcast too, is just show that nobody's life is perfect.
no.
Nobody's. And it's,
Everybody has a story.
yes, everybody has something.
Yes.
And obviously, some people have worse things than others, but like either way, that's everybody's individual story and their struggles that they've been through. And that's
Yeah,
what's made them who they are now, too.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's really it.
Yeah.
Like, as sucky as that was, and it
Mhm.
was the worst time in my life,
Mm,
there were things in me that needed to be healed, childhood wounds and just other things. And had I not gone through that with him, I wouldn't have healed.
mm,
And had I not healed and healed things that needed to be healed, I would have carried that luggage with me to every relationship.
Yeah.
And so, as awful as what happened was, I'm so thankful
Mm,
because I'm the healthiest version of myself. When I met my now husband, I was like, you are getting the best version of me.
mm,
I'm like, I know what my shit is. I know what my baggage is. I'm honest about it. I don't play games. And so all of a sudden today, I have this amazing relationship that I never would have been able to have had I been that person before.
mm. So that's been a very recurring theme in all of my interviews
Oh, is
is,
that right?
yeah, would you go back and change it?
Hmm.
Obviously, you would never want to go through that again. If you
No.
could prevent having
Mm-mm.
to go through that, you wouldn't. But at the same
Right.
time, it's what's made you who you are and
Yeah.
made you grow. And I feel a little bit that way about my own story. As
Yeah.
much as I don't want to struggle with infertility
Yep.
again or
Yep.
ever. At the same time, I've learned a lot about myself too through that. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to give that stuff up.
No, I like this version of me
Mm,
way better.
I love,
And it's the version that I needed to get to.
yeah.
And I think, yeah, none of us would pick the hard stuff that we have in life.
Mhm.
Like with your infertility journey, if you laid it out in front of you and said, all right, you're going to be better than you are now, but you have to go through this, you'd be like, no, not
Yeah.
doing it.
Mhm.
That looks way too painful. And I would say the same thing. I would never want to relive it. I would never wish it on anybody in my life
Mhm.
ever. But where I am today, I am so thankful that I'm on this side of it. I am so thankful for the lessons I learned because now I get to have this healthy relationship with this man that I absolutely adore
Mm,
and who knows everything about me. He knows all the good and the bad.
mm,
And I never had that before,
yeah.
ever,
Oh,
because I was always hiding. I was always afraid. I lived just a shell of myself.
mm,
And so to be able to have this rigorous honesty with a person, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
oh, that's amazing. How long have you guys been together?
It will be 3 years this summer.
Okay. And how
Yep.
did you guys meet? Let's go there for a minute.
So, we both were done with dating,
Hmm.
and we met through friends online. Like, we both showed up on each other's Facebook page,
Hmm.
and it's the funniest story because he would comment on my stuff, I'd comment on his, but I didn't really pay that much attention to him.
Hmm.
And one day my mom said to me, she's, "Who is this guy? Who's this Tim guy?" I'm like,
Hmm.
"I don't know, mom. I've got like 5,000 people. I really don't know who he is." And she goes, "I checked into him and I think you should check into him." I'm like, "Okay."
Oh.
Now, my mom and I do not agree on a lot of things like this. So, right there, I was like, if you like him, I'm probably not going
Oh
to.
no.
And so I looked into him and then we just kept communicating and figured out, hey, we have these mutual friends and decided we would meet for a drink one time, but just as friends,
Hmm.
because as we can commiserate over all our bad dating. You're done dating, I'm done dating. Great. I just need a friend at this point.
Mm.
And so we go out for a drink and we shut the restaurant down
Oh
and sat
wow.
there and talked for 5 straight hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's been it. We've been together ever since.
Oh, I
And
love
so we
that.
just got married this past December and it was the best. It was
Mm.
like, and we did it just the two of us on a beach. And it was everything that I'd always wanted, to
Yeah.
just know that this person saw me and loved me with all
Mm.
my flaws and everything else. And they knew my whole story and they knew my role in the story and they knew, but just have somebody who knows you and loves you.
Yeah.
And I realized when I met him and when I fell in love with him, I'd never had that before.
Oh wow.
Yeah, never.
Mm.
So now I have this great person who makes me drinks when I do my podcast with my friend Tawny.
Yay. I like him too.
Yeah,
I've never even
yeah.
met him.
I know. He's awesome. He's awesome.
Oh, that's a great happy ending to your
Mhm.
story.
Thank God. Not everybody always has the happy ending, but I
Yeah.
feel like I do.
Yeah. And I'm sure the work continues. I feel like we're never done working on ourselves. You're in a
Ever.
better place, but and I'm sure that trauma will stay with you for a while, maybe for forever.
Yeah, we've had to work through things. I've reacted, to comments or things have hurt my
Mm,
feelings, and he's like, "Why are you so upset?" I'm like, "Blah, you mad?" He's, "I don't
mm,
know."
yeah.
So, it is. When you've gone through abuse of any sort,
Mm,
the effects linger, and
yeah.
they are. It's a lifetime of working through them and believing people who when they say, "This is who I am, this is how I am," and thank God he is consistent, and he's
Mhm.
kind, and he's consistent,
Yeah.
and that's been huge for me
Yeah.
to try to heal from some of this because
Yeah.
the emotional abuse it was bad. It was really bad the last 10
Mhm.
years.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And that's a long time to endure that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So, what advice or parting words would you give somebody that may or may not be in that type of a relationship and is afraid to leave?
It is really hard. You're gonna leave when you're ready to leave,
Mm,
but don't let the fear
mm,
of what if, the fear of failure, the fear of what will people think.
mm,
You can't let that dictate your decisions because there is a cost. For every decision we make, there's a cost
mm,
to us. And if you decide to stay in a relationship that isn't healthy, just know there's going to be a cost and it's accumulative.
mm.
So 10 years of emotional abuse, 10 years after I found out of staying, the cost was huge
Yeah.
and it took a lot longer to heal,
Yeah. A lot more work, huh?
a lot more work
Mm,
because I had to do the original work that needed to be done. And
mm,
then I had to do the work of 10 years of emotional abuse
mm.
because the original work always needed to be done. But then you add staying and what I thought was the right thing to do.
Sure.
And yeah, it does. Everything has a cost. And
Yeah.
you just have to weigh what do you want that cost to be? And you can't stay for the kids.
That was going to be one of my other questions.
You can't
I
stay
know
for kids.
so many people that are so afraid to leave because they have kids and
They
I'm
see more than you think.
oh,
They know
100%.
more.
You said you're from a divorced marriage. I don't know how old you were when your parents
I
got
was
divorced,
old. I
but
was like 30 and
okay,
it
I was
still sucked.
19
Yeah, it still
and
sucked.
yeah, and but I was also not naive and blind to what was going on behind the scenes. And
Right.
as much as they tried to hide the fighting and hide the things, like I
Mhm.
wasn't clueless to the fact that they weren't happy. And
Right.
then that is the example that was set for a long time for
Yeah.
me. Not a long time. I would say my parents were happy at most of it until the very end,
Mhm.
but there was a time period where I knew they weren't happy
Yeah.
and I think younger kids especially pick up on more than we think.
Yes. They feel more. They may not understand it. They may not have the
Mhm.
words. But when I think about my daughter yelling, "Stop yelling at my mommy.
Mm,
Be nice to my mommy. Stop saying mean things to my mommy."
mm,
She was seeing something that I never would have chosen her to see.
yeah.
But by choosing to stay and thinking I was doing the right thing, I did choose that. And that was a hard one for me. I thought I did the right thing, but I didn't protect her. I just delayed. I delayed my healing. I delayed her seeing what a healthy, loving relationship looked like.
Yeah. Oh, that's real tough. I know that's going to get some people because it's a really hard thing. And I hear it a lot. I've been doing
Yeah.
hair for a really long time and I've talked to
Oh, you're a
so many
therapist.
women. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You honest to God, you hear everything.
They tell us that in beauty school too. So,
That's funny. That's
yeah.
funny, but it's true.
Yeah. And so I've talked to I've been doing hair for 20 years now.
Mhm.
And I've talked to a lot of women on a lot of different walks of life.
Yep.
And I've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
I've heard it a lot that, or people who don't have the means to leave or stuff too.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
That is hard.
Yeah.
There's never an easy answer.
Never.
No, life's not easy.
No, never. I wish, right?
No, it's just not.
That's the fairy tale we all want.
I know.
Oh,
I know. And even I'm so happy today, but it doesn't
good.
mean life's not without challenges.
Oh, for
It's
sure. I
just
mean,
thank God it's not in this area of my
yeah,
life.
it changes.
Like, I feel like Jesus was like, "You know what? You've had a shit run here with relationships.
Mm.
I think we got you here."
Oh, that's so good. Oh, Wow, what a story.
It's incredible. It's funny because I knew I was gonna be telling it to you today, and it has been so long now. My daughter's 19 now,
Okay.
and she now knows a few things where I protected her for a long time, even after the divorce, and because I didn't want her to hate her dad.
Mm,
I wanted her to have the healthiest relationship that she could with him. And
mhm.
then she started seeing things and noticing things and asking honest questions, and I was always honest with her, but yeah, I think about how long it's been. I was like, "Oh my gosh."
Wow.
But yet telling you, I'm like, "Oh, it's like it just happened yesterday."
Those feelings and emotions and trauma stay with you, and your
They
body
do. They do.
recognizes it. I don't know if I talked about this on a previous episode, so maybe I'll cut this out if I did, but I was reading a book by Oprah Winfrey and this neuroscientist, and I should
Yes.
really remember his name. Have you read that book?
I know the book you're talking about. I haven't read it, but I know which one you're talking about.
It's called What Happened to You.
Mhm.
And he goes deep into the brain science stuff, right? Which
Yep.
was fascinating to me. I had to read it little bits at a time though, because it was a
Yes.
little too much sometimes, too sciencey sometimes.
Mhm.
But they told this story of this little boy who was in an abuse. His parents were abusive. They put him in the foster system. His foster parents were abusive to the point where he ended up in a coma
Oh my god.
in the hospital. And I don't remember exactly why they brought this neuroscientist guy into the hospital, but he, for some reason, decided to bring a piece of clothing that belonged to the kid's biological dad. And this kid's in a coma, and he has a physical response to the scent of these
Mhm.
clothes. And
Mhm.
I don't know if we fully understand what happens to your brain in a coma, but presumably it's not functioning properly.
Right.
And he still physically reacted to it because his brain remembers that trauma and his
Yes.
body held on to that. And
Yep.
so I really believe that stuff stays with you. And then you have triggers and stuff that pop up and
Yep.
have to figure that out. And I
Yeah.
do think time helps heal that stuff for sure.
It does, but I think you also have to do the work
Yes.
because
Yes.
I had a, massage therapist, energy healer who told me one time, she's "Your issues are in your tissues."
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so true that your body does hold on. Your body
Mhm.
remembers.
Mhm.
And so that story doesn't surprise me at all because even if
Mhm.
we don't acknowledge it and deal with it, it stores in us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can only run so far and so long
That's true. That's
because
true.
you're always going to catch yourself.
And it's going to rear its ugly head at some point in some
It
form.
does.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. And it usually is ugly. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's just not going to be pretty. So you might as well just deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, all right, my dear. Thank you so
You're
much for
welcome.
sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable. I know that was not an easy thing to do. So thank you for going back to
You're
that
welcome.
with me. I'm very grateful and I'm so sorry you went through all that, but I'm so glad that you're in a much better place and you seem
Mm.
like you're glowing and just so happy. And I love that
I'm
for
happy. I'm
you.
good. I'm
Good.
good. Let this
Good.
be, yeah, I'm good. I'm on the other side. Thank
Yeah.
God. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. We hope that anybody out there that's going through this
Mhm.
also can get to the other side of that at some point.
Just know there's another side. Even
Mm,
just the knowing.
yeah. Yeah. All
Know
right.
that there are better days.
Oh, yes. That gives people so much hope too, just to know that somebody's gone through it, somebody's gotten to the other side.
Mm.
So thank you so much again for
You're welcome.
sharing. I appreciate you. All right, everyone. Thanks, Melissa, for being on. And I guess we'll catch you all on the next episode. Thanks. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.